President Biden has bowed to pressure from the Democratic Party following a disastrous debate performance against former President Donald Trump last month, and has announced that he is stepping down just 107 days before the election. With polls showing that most voters disapproved of Biden's performance and thought he was too old for the job, President Biden has endorsed Vice President Kamala Harris to replace him. In his announcement, he said that, "I believe it is in the best interest of my party and the country for me to stand down and to focus solely on fulfilling my duties as president for the remainder of my term." Now, the last time this happened was more than 50 years ago, where in March 1968, President Johnson, the incumbent U.S. president, opted out of running for a second term, leaving Vice President Humphrey to battle it out with Senator McCarthy. Vice President Humphrey left the convention as the Democratic nominee with the majority of delegates, but the convention put an ugly intra-party battle on display. Possibly due to that and a host of other reasons, resulted in Republican Richard Nixon winning the election that November. Now, while Vice President Harris has been endorsed by President Biden, her nomination as the Democratic presidential candidate is not assured. At this point, it is important to know more about Kamala Harris, the presidential candidate. Vice President Harris was a former senator from California who campaigned to be president back in 2020 before she eventually bowed out and endorsed Biden for president. She was then picked as Biden's running mate and made history when she was elected vice president, becoming the first woman, first Black American, and first South Asian American to serve in the position. Now emerging as a top contender to replace President Biden, Harris said in a statement that she intends to earn and win this nomination, do everything in her power to unite the Democratic Party and defeat Donald Trump. Harris is the preferred candidate, and it might be unlikely that there would be a contest because of the tight timelines as potential candidates are up against the clock with the party convention on August 19th. A nominated candidate must be presented in writing and include written approval from the proposed nominee, as well as a petition with signatures from at least 300 convention delegates. Harris has already racked up enough endorsements that this will be easy for her to pull together. But for other candidates, lining up that support could be more of a challenge. A lot would depend on whether the Democrats and the 4,700 or so convention delegates would stand behind a single candidate. And one of the biggest questions is, who could be her running mate? Or could the potential running mate be a challenger by also seeking a nomination themselves? California Governor Gavin Newsom is among the names that have popped up both as a potential running mate and a presidential nomination challenger. Governor Newsom has been a keen supporter of President Biden and has made little secret of his own presidential ambitions, thus fueling speculation that he will run in 2028. So if 2028 is a possibility, why not 2024? Another possible challenger is Pennsylvania's Governor Josh Shapiro. Although he only took office last year, he is already seen as a rising star for the Democratic Party. With a legal background that is similar to Harris, Shapiro served as the state's attorney general, and he has a long history of winning elections against the Republicans in a state that Democrats believe they must win to secure the election in November. How would a Harris versus Trump election look like for the U.S. dollar? The initial reaction on the U.S. dollar following President Biden's announcement was to dip briefly, and this move could be attributed to increased uncertainty in the U.S. politics. But we are going to look beyond the initial reaction and more into what could happen to the U.S. dollar in the longer term, in the event of a victory for the Republicans or the Democrats. The Republican and Democratic parties in the United States have differing economic philosophies and policy preferences, which can influence their views on the value of the U.S. dollar. Republican. Emphasis on free market principles. Prefer lower taxes, especially for businesses and higher-income individuals, believing it stimulates economic growth. Keep inflation low to maintain the purchasing power of consumers and attract foreign investments. Republicans often prefer a strong dollar as it can reflect economic strength and stability. Democrats. Emphasis on social welfare programs and support for lower-income and middle-class families. Favor higher taxes on the wealthy and corporations to reduce income inequality. Support domestic manufacturing by boosting employment in export-oriented industries and reducing trade deficits. Democrats may prefer a weaker dollar as it can make U.S. exports more competitive globally, while Republicans traditionally prefer a stronger U.S. dollar to reflect economic strength and stability. Democrats might favor a weaker dollar to support exports and domestic job creation. These preferences are not absolute and can be influenced by the specific economic circumstances and policy priorities of the administration in power. Back in 2017, when Trump became president, the U.S. dollar and economy strengthened as the Republicans' preferred mix of low taxes and economic expansion added to the dollar's appeal. However, when Trump left office in 2021, the strength of the USD was relatively unchanged. Now in 2024, with the U.S. economy battling inflation and high interest rates, markets anticipate that a Trump victory could be bearish for the U.S. dollar, as it would be the easiest way to help boost American manufacturing industries. In fact, back in April, Trump had also stated that a stronger dollar would be disaster for manufacturers and others, as they would be unable to compete and will be forced to either lose lots of business or build plants in the other countries. Plotting the various Republican and Democratic presidential administrations from 1993, the strength or weakness of the U.S. dollar does not seem to be strongly correlated with the party bias or the intention of the administration. In fact, it'll probably be safer to conclude that regardless of the party or president, the performance of the U.S. dollar is going to be highly dependent on any potential shocks that could upset or cause a spur in the market. Who do you think will win the coming election? What will happen to the U.S. dollar? Leave your views in the comments below as we stay tuned to more ups and downs in the lead-up to the presidential election in November.